We know that around 170 foreign dignitaries were invited to the funeral stash, and we saw many of the more famous state leaders, certainly Donald Trump, the US president, in the front row of mourners at the service. What did you make of the Pope's ability to bring some of these figures together?
I mean, I think, it's testament to the papacy's enduring moral authority, as, the Pope being someone who can bridge divides, who's obviously not seen as a political actor who's siding with one side or another, but someone who can speak with authority on issues like Pope Francis did, things that he made dear to his papacy, such as climate change and the way that it affects, it's something that affects all of humanity, just doesn't stop at political divides. And I think that kind of moral authority that Pope Francis embodied is part of the reason we saw so many of these leaders making the trip to the Vatican here today, warranting a lot of high security, is worth saying, to make sure that all the people here are safe. I think obviously Donald Trump being one of the kind of headliners, if you can put it that way, his meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, in St. Peter's Basilica before the funeral, I think was just another extraordinary moment, given the negotiations between those two and Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, to end the war in Ukraine. White House describing this discussion that you're seeing on your screen now between Trump and Zelensky as very productive. I think that the Pope, would have been heartened as someone who spoke out consistently against the war in Ukraine, also the war in Gaza, to see efforts to sort of bring this conflict to a close. It was not just Trump and Zelensky, however. We were among, the dignitaries who are not perhaps in the reserved seating on the stage. We also came across famous dissident Julian Assange, who was imprisoned, or rather, kept in some form of detention or another for 14 years in the UK. Someone who Pope Francis had a connection with. He sent him a letter, in fact, in 2021, while Julian Assange was in the UK's Belmarsh prison. Stella Assange, Julian Assange's wife, they were married by a Catholic chaplain in Belmarsh prison, later met Pope Francis in 2023, and described the fact that she was received there as representative of the Pope's concern for Assange and for other prisoners. So I think it's really been a remarkable show of all of these people who've come to the Vatican from different religions, as you say. We have Catholics, we have Protestants, we have Muslims, people from all kinds of backgrounds coming here, and just showing the enduring power that the papacy has as a moral authority for the rest of the world.
And we know that Pope Francis didn't always see eye to eye with US President Donald Trump, for example. Certainly Pope Francis is somebody that was known for representing the needs of asylum seekers and migrants, understanding the pressures they were under to try and change their lives for the better. Not always seen that way by many world leaders in the debate about how many people fleeing violent situations in their homeland should be received in other countries, at a time when Donald Trump was famously trying to build a wall between the US and Mexico, and Pope Francis was talking about building bridges rather than erecting barriers. And yet we're seeing again these extraordinary still images of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump hunched over, clearly given a couple of chairs by some officials within the Vatican so they could have this impromptu gathering. And at the time, Stash, we were a bit curious as to why we'd seen video of Donald Trump paying his respects next to the coffin of Pope Francis, and yet he was one of the last leaders to come out into the sunshine and take his seat in St. Peter's Square itself. And this now explains it. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and also the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, seen in one of the photos next to Zelensky and Trump, clearly trying to encourage those talks or reintroduce them, because the timing is so crucial with everything on a knife edge in terms of the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out also a sort of quirk of the nature of this event and how it was organised. We learned yesterday or a couple of days ago from the Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni about how the leaders would be seated, that it would be alphabetical, so you might expect the leaders of the United States and Ukraine to be seated one next to one another, or rather close to one another, but it would be alphabetical in French, so that the United States, as États-Unis would not be beginning with an E, would be far from Ukraine. So I think there was, a lot of speculation before this event about whether or not there would be this kind of meeting between the leaders of the United States and Ukraine, given the tensions that obviously exist between them, given after the disastrous, I think it's fair to describe it, meeting in the Oval Office between Zelensky and Vice President J.D. Vance and President Trump, that meeting would take place here, and there could be some kind of another breakthrough perhaps in these ongoing talks. So I think, yeah, certainly a remarkable and in some ways unexpected moment today.
Yeah, and we've been told, haven't we, repeatedly in recent days, the United States is suggesting it may have to walk away from the talks if a resolution can't be found. And the discussion is certainly about potentially how much territory Ukraine might have to concede to Russia in an effort to bring peace, something that's clearly a difficult thing for Volodymyr Zelensky to agree to. And we know how hard him and his country people have fought after that Russian invasion. Interestingly, President Zelensky, again, not wearing a suit, not wearing a tie, all formal in black. But of course, that was one of the argument points when he had that infamous visit to President Trump in the United States recently that you alluded to, Stash.